Yeah, look, I can't wait until we're bullish on ETH again. Like
Yeah.
that's going to be a very exciting time. Um, ETH is a moneymaker, objectively.
Everybody that I've talked to has just stopped bridging over to L2s. Like it just doesn't like to new L2s. What was the last one that you were like, oh, this is worth it? Like, what are you gonna do on these L2s? That and at some point, the market realizes that they stop building L2s because nobody else is funding L2s. Nothing said on 0x Research is a recommendation to buy or sell securities or tokens. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and any views expressed by anyone on the show are solely our opinions, not financial advice. Boccaccio, Ryan, and our guests may hold positions in the companies, funds, or projects discussed. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of 0x Research. Today I'm joined by Danny, Ryan, and Mark from the Blockworks research team to talk about everything that is happening in crypto. How are you doing, guys?
Great.
Bullish.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, fantastic. Big week. Actually, I feel like we actually have some stuff to talk about this week apart from just meme coins. Hyperliquid announced that they will be launching their token on the 11th of November. Pretty big news. Before I pull up some spreadsheets and some comps, I want to hear about people's thoughts on Hyperliquid. Have you used it? If you've used it, do you like it? How do you view the perps landscape in general? Et cetera, et cetera. What are we thinking?
I think first observation is you should not be ignoring Hyperliquid. It's rapidly taken market share and has a ton of outstanding reviews almost universally from crypto people that I speak with. Um, it's obviously generating meaningful revenue and volume. The most interesting thing here is that like this is a like very unique experiment in crypto where starting out as an app chain and pivoting more general purpose, trying to move towards more spot assets. Like we'll see how that goes. um from our reports that we've written, you guys know that the team increasingly believes like it's critical to have adjacency to spot assets and asset issuers, as it allows you to cross sell more products and generate more fees. If asset issuers don't want to put their assets on your chain, you're going to have a really hard time attracting capital. So it's just something to watch. Like, can they pull this off? I think they're kind of like pivot towards spot assets like really validates that thesis that they feel like they need it to like maintain market share on a go forward basis. So that's like kind of what I'll be watching, right? Like as I look out on this landscape, like everyone's competing for asset issuers. Can Hyperliquid, like, do they offer a unique enough experience to attract those asset issuers and like compound volume? Like it's TBD, but like looking at it like post TG is like probably the most important time to start paying attention, right? So we'll see.
Yeah, I agree on that post TGE comment, but I want to kind of run over some numbers. So Hyperliquid is leading in perps volume. Over the past week, they've done double the volume of their closest competitor. I don't know if that's particularly relevant for like 7-day data, but if we look at 30-day data, they are leading as well. I think out of the protocols that I've chosen, I chose the relevant ones. So Jupiter, DYDX, Vertex, GMX, Drift, Orderly, and Gains, and Avo. I think they're like 45, 46% of volume over the past month. And like based on, so I ran some numbers, and based on a Drift and DYDX comp, like based on whatever FTV over fees they have, Hyperliquid should be at 2.5 to 3 bill FTV, which would put let me go to my next slide, which would put points at, so this is by the ASXN guys, and I also have the Messari one, but which would put points at I think $15 to $20 according to ASXN, and and a bit higher, but around the same range, 17 to 20 according to the Messari guys, which would make this quite a sizable airdrop. But like you said, Ryan, I mean, that cross asset thing is really the big thing. Is like, if are we gonna see actual apps launch? Has been the question for quite some time, and from what I've seen, there are quite a few apps building on top of it. Now, DYDX is also going with a similar approach where they're now allowing permissionless smart contracts under L1. And I just haven't seen that many apps launching on DYDX, like, or at least like even if you just scrape Twitter, rarely see any like apps or anything launching on DYDX. Versus like if you look at Hyperliquid, every week it seems like my scraper is catching 50, 60 protocols that somehow mention Hyperliquid in their bio. And obviously, only like 2 or 3 of those will go to market, but that's still. And I think like on the one end, I get what you mean, but as in like if you're a perps dex, you don't really want to isolate yourself. But on the other end, I mean, if you can just like win the whole stack, you should go for it. No, it just makes complete sense. And I feel like I have to preface all Hyperliquid discussion with the fact that they are only running 4 validators in Tokyo right now. Like they're all co-located, so whatever performance metrics you see are curated. Is how I'm gonna say it. They're like very like, I don't know if it's going to scale. Obviously, like when you decentralize, it depends on how many validators you add. It depends on like how you decentralize the network. I assume they won't have too many, or they'll make it difficult to run so that they get some form of like SUI/Aptos type of validator set where it's like 100 to 200 professionals who just like are able to run very, very robust, big nodes. But yeah, overall, like I feel like I've talked about it on the pod multiple times. I'm super excited. I think even on my little Hyperliquid comps page, even at a 40% discount, I mean, like if we assume that volumes drop 40% post TGE, it's still looking at like 1.5 to 1.8 bill FTV, which would still make it a pretty big airdrop. So
Yeah,
not only am I, what's up?
sorry. So what's going on here is that you've mapped out as a function of volume and comping it against the largest legitimate perp dexes in the space, that even if volume falls 40% from pre-TGE, you're still going to get $1 billion valuation if you're looking at the average valuation or median valuation across like relevant comps.
I think at average valuation is average like FTV over fees is 24.4 for the relevant. Like I only picked relevant protocols. There's some that are higher, some that are lower. I just wanted to do it based on like protocols that I care about.
Yep.
It would be around 1 bill if it was the average. If we're doing the drift and the DYDX multipliers, it's above 1.5 or around 1.5 to above 1.5 bill valuation. And I took, now Hyperliquid doesn't have fee data available. I know that some of their fees go to the insurance pool and some go to the HLP, but just based off like whatever DYDX charges, which seems to be 1.5 bips, I extrapolated that to Hyperliquid. So this might not be the final like actual official number, but I think it's a pretty safe bet to say they're competitive with DYDX, or else I don't see, like, as far as I understand, they don't really do big market maker rebates. I'm sure they do whatever the industry standard is. The team doesn't really seem like the team to just give away token and equity very easily, given that they're very anti-VC. But I don't know. It might be wrong. I just made some assumptions, and I think it should hold. TBD. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most interesting thing that you referenced there is that DYDX is kind of going the smart contract platform way. I don't want to make this a Unichain discussion, but Unichain is also doing the same thing where they're spinning up their own chain, but it's general purpose. Um, I think the app chain thesis, like, I don't know, a lot of people are like celebrating here, like, this validates the app chain thesis. Like, what are you talking about? These are general purpose chains. This doesn't validate the app chain thesis. This validates like the desire of any one app to make as much money as possible and own the entire stack. And the fact that like people will use that brand to do so if they can. Um, so yeah, I think that that's the most interesting kind of trend here that seems to be underappreciated from the discourse that I'm seeing.
Something that I think is interesting is when you look at that list of comps, Jupiter is very
Yeah.
near the top there. If you were to say post TGE Hyperliquid activity drops off 40-50%, they could be the top of that list, despite already having a token and just essentially copying the mechanism from a GMX. Um, I do find that interesting, especially in the context of like the Unichain, DYDX, building out your own chain idea. I think Jupiter has been continually like taking this the opposite direction, remaining on Solana and just like trying to gobble up all of the potential related products in the category across swaps, perps, et cetera. They're trying to really become that kind of DeFi hub for Solana, and it's been kind of, I don't know if it's been quietly working or people are just aware that it's working like this, but I think it's honestly interesting and surprising to see that they have kind of trended up and are near the top of perps volume.
Yeah, and it's working out for them. I wonder if they're gonna start making Meteora, which is their like DLMM product, more and more relevant as well, because they also have that. I'm not sure if it's going to have a separate token or if it's going to be on the Jupiter token. I really should switch that up. But yeah, I agree with you. It's completely different direction. I guess Solana can support it. Even though like these days it's a bit difficult to make swaps on Solana. It's a bit congested. We'll see how it gets when it's like peak bull. Um, but yeah, agreed. Like they don't have to go off chain because the chain already works and accommodates them.
And maybe just a tidbit to add is that like within the space, I've heard comments that, people talk about Jupiter perps and they say it's maybe not a great experience and there's quite a bit of love for Hyperliquid. But it's interesting to not see that dynamic reflected in the usage, I guess is what I would say. I think frequently we say, we see kind of touts of like build a greater product and then you'll see that activity. But I don't know. I've seen, lots of negative comments about the Jupiter perp experience. And obviously there's, as we're seeing, there's a lot of excitement about Hyperliquid and we could see post TG that dominance flip. So
yeah. I think it's also tough to be excited about a product that already has an 8 bill FDV. Like Jupiter, I feel it may not be like perfectly priced, but like at 8 bill, you're not really looking for anything else. It dominates perps on Solana. I feel like it's more like against drift than it is against. If Jupiter can come on your chain, implement some not broken, but not as efficient as it should be peer to pool model, perp stacks and can steal all of the volume, then like if I'm drift, I'm at least a little bit worried because you're already like based on these comps, they're already semi overpriced. I know comps aren't everything, and you need to take into factor like future growth and whatever they can do in the future. But like if Jupiter is eating your lunch with a peer to pool model, then like if I'm drift, I'm taking a step back and saying, hey, instead of maybe yapping at Hyperliquid on Twitter, I should focus a bit more on my product and make it so that people actually want to trade on it.
Yeah, it's we can't ignore the execution on Jupiter. They've been really fantastic. And again, they kind of highlight that the importance of being adjacent to asset issuers. They are they have the potential to bring in a lot of fees just given they own a lot of, the pieces of the relationship. Um, you can do spot trading here, you can leverage up over there, all within one system. Minimizing that friction is incredibly important. But they don't, like the problem that I see is that they don't have a cross collateral risk engine, which is super important for institutional capital. Now, like you can say, like, okay, they'll build it, whatever. Like they can cross that bridge when they get to it. I think the problem there is that I think it took Drift like 12 or 18 months to build their cross collateral engine. So it's not an easy thing to build. And we know that not many of them exist in DeFi. And if they do, they're extremely limited in the amount of assets that they can handle. So I mean, look, you're coming to this kind of inflection point in crypto where, regulation might, um, you know, get, where we might get some regulatory clarity and participating on chain will become much more palatable to traditional financial institutions that expect, certain features out of the box, and cross collateral is something like obviously a sophisticated institution should expect to see when they show up on chain. And right now, Drift is the only player that allows for that. So, yeah, they are 1 to 3% of total perps volume at any given time. Like that's a minority market share, but it's up like I don't know 20 to 50x over the past month, or sorry, over the past year, and they're pretty positioned for like a post fire dancer world, a post regulatory clarity world, where like I can't say that for the competition.
I just want to say Jupiter keeps coming up in many conversations as a competitor to X and Y, and maybe why they took 12 to 18 months to build one added feature, the stick cross feature on their perps, is because they're building so many other features across different verticals, like even on the distribution side with their app. I think I've spoken about before that they just want to be the one-stop shop for most things DeFi and keep like expanding into that category. And then, there's some criticisms on like for like maybe their perps in terms of like capital inefficiency, right? How much like TVL it requires to produce volume. I was in the capital efficiency bucket for years, but now I kind of see capital and efficiency a little bit different in the sense that having all of this TVL is actually a blessing. It allows you to use, and if you're inefficient, it allows you to use some of that TVL in another product, maybe, like not too dissimilar from what Camino is doing, apart from like using their TVL that they got from being a borrow lending platform and then using it in other verticals as well.
Yeah, I echo your. I didn't realize that was bridging. I actually said this to Jeff on the pod as well. I was like, dude, like however you guys built this bridging experience, because it was near instant, and I think they built it all out themselves as well, which it'll be difficult to do going forward as well. Like if they want to build it out for every chain, I'm not sure if they want to do that necessarily, but yeah, it was kind of crazy that you didn't even feel that you bridged. Like I thought it was just on Arbitrum, and it's not. Hey guys, for today's snippet, I'm once again joined by Miguel, who's the co-founder and chief scientific officer at Nillion. Thanks so much for joining us, Miguel.
Hi, Boccaccio. Great to see you again.
So I want to ask about why data is important for AI as a quick overview.
Well, I guess data is the engine that moves AI, right? You find very sensitive data, starting from the training data sets that sometimes are private and very sensitive, going all the way through user inputs and prompts, and including also model weights. So those three elements are really sensitive and pieces of information and data, and therefore, AI is in essence a data-centric thing. You actually are moving and transforming data as you move it and push it across or through an AI model. So it is extremely important indeed.
Perfect. And one thing I was unaware of is that there are different levels of AI data with different importance. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, essentially there are like three levels. Level one is the things that you do that are public anyway, like your, your Instagram posts, your YouTube videos, also your blockchain transactions, they're public, and also blog posts and so on. So that's not really something very concerning to people. Level two is like your digital fingerprint. It incorporates your the cookies that track your browsing activity, your search history, your social media preferences. Again, that's not something people are really sensitive about, and it's fine in most cases to give that information away. But then comes level three, which is a different ball game. We're talking here about high value data, which is essentially priceless. I'm talking here about, for example, the things that you would only share with your therapist, all the email messages you've sent, all the things you've said verbally, because conversations will be recorded, in real life, the lies you've told, the truth that weren't totally true, your entire medical history, all the things you've purchased, your opinions about people, like what you really think about your boss or your mother-in-law, and also kind of the things you're not that aware of, like your blind spots, to what extent you are really smart or as smart as you think you are. No, all those things are really sensitive. It could destroy a person's life, either professional or personal life. So this is a different ballgame. This is something that you would definitely wouldn't like to be sharing with third parties at all.
And how does Nillion fit in here?
Yeah, to begin with, Nillion is a network to store and retrieve AI data. So you can think of it in terms of this secure storage layer that is decentralized, and it's making use of these advanced privacy enhancing technologies so that you can be sure that the data is safe. It's not going to be accessible to the nodes running the network. But then the interesting thing is blind compute, of course, is the fact that you can compute, run processes and programs on top of that data without having to reveal it or decrypt it or make it public. So therefore, it makes it very easy for developers to actually develop programs that are privacy preserving, so that make use of that data in a privacy preserving manner. And one thing that I think makes us different is that we are aiming for these general purpose development tools that are based on PyTorch. So we're not asking AI developers to change their mindset about the way they do things. They can just proceed in the same way. They don't have to become experts in, let's say, cryptography or anything like that. They can still use the same tooling, but now it's running on these PET rails, and in doing so, it's actually protecting everything that is involved in the mix, like the data training sets, the model weights, and the user inputs, which is probably the most important thing. And then we have another aspect that makes us unique, which is this innovation I was talking about in our last episode, this DWT thing, that is the discrete wavelet transform, this set of techniques taken from image processing and brought into the privacy enhancing technologies world, that actually remove the bottlenecks or greatly or vastly accelerate the bottleneck computations around the evaluation of nonlinear functions like the activation functions or the normalization layers in a neural network. And then I would say you're dealing with a network in the end, right? So we make it really easy for developers to actually deploy it on a real network with real nodes, and to incorporate built-in payments, because it runs everything through our token. That's what we call the AI VM, the AI virtual machine. And it's something that we are about to finalize right now, and we're very excited about it, actually.
Perfect. That all sounds very exciting. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Boccaccio.
All right, moving forward, we have, this is another big news that happened this week, is Off the Grid has gone off the charts. So Off the Grid is this new game that has its own Avalanche L1 called Guns. It is a first-person shooter escape royale, which combines elements from doesn't combine elements. It's like easy to think of it of like a mix between Escape from Tarkov and Call of Duty Warzone, where like you're looting throughout the game, but you're still in a battle royale. I think the main thing that they added is like cyber arms and cyber legs, where you can like pick up specific types of arms and legs throughout the game, and they give you different boosts. They're currently the number 7th game on Epic Game Store's most played free-to-play game, which is huge. At peak October 11, there was 150,000 viewers on Twitch for Off the Grid content. Daily transactions are still above 3 mil, which is quite impressive. And Daniel Smith might kick my ass for this, but wallet addresses on Gunzilla are over 6 mil. I don't think that like really represents the amount of players, but potentially. And I think more relevantly, it's like this is the first game that has been adopted by mainstream like people don't immediately just say, oh, this is just a dog shit NFT game. There's still a strong number, like a decent amount of people who are saying that, but I think they've done a pretty good marketing campaign where they got Ninja, Tim the Tapman, Shroud, a few other big names, like a few other big streamers, and I assume they paid them to promote the game, and it's worked out pretty well. So I think like two questions I have over this is one, what do you do in the case that there's no way to get exposure to off the grid? There's no gun token. How do you, as an analyst, approach this? And question number two is, and I think Ryan wanted to bring this one up. Do you think this changes how gamers view crypto gaming? Because they've always hated it. Have we gone to a point where it's like if Tim the Tap Man says it's okay, then everybody will say it's okay, or is it? How do we see the landscape change over there?
Yep, not an expert on gaming. I poke my head in to the gaming space in crypto once every few months just to see what's going on. There's usually nothing going on. However, and just as historical observation, like if you look at, what GPs were telling LPs in the crypto space back in 2017, 2016, they're like, man, gaming's right around the corner. And you've heard that consistently since, and it just hasn't happened. But like, it's very obviously like technology interested people. Crypto has created like a lot of financial games. Like it seems like it's the gamers are a very like obvious like adjacent like crypto user base that the space has the opportunity to onboard. So super important to keep up on it. Really exciting to see this take off. Like the most interesting thing for me is not whether or not this game is going to be successful or speculating on the assets in the game, but what it does to the psychology of gamers that are using this game, that like this game, and that feel the crypto aspect of it. Like it could be that has the potential for it to be that 0 to 1 moment where it changes gamers' perception on the space. Because I don't know, from what I've seen historically, gamers not only are uninterested in crypto, but they at times hate crypto. I think mostly due to like the NFT speculative phase in 2021. So we'll see if this can change some minds. To me, that's the most important thing about the story going forward.
I want to just add one thing before I open it up to the floor. But actually, two things. First of all, I think that gamers hate crypto because they never really got into it, and it was like you said, it's such a perfect crypto adjacent space, but most of them missed out on crypto and the money that was made in crypto that now they're like, oh, it's all a scam. I don't think it's the NFT speculation where they just lost money. This is just something that is like anecdotal. Number two, I think it might be helpful if I explain what actually happens in the game that is crypto related. So everything in the game, all in-game items are NFTs, and you earn rewards in the gun token currently on testnet, and that's really all that there is in crypto. Yeah, there's a wallet interface, and you have to pay fees. Like gamers will still have to pay fees, but because they're earning gun token, then like it doesn't matter. They're just giving up a portion of their fees. But it's not like the way that I would imagine a Web 2.5 game blew up. It's like very abstracted away. I think it's like there's still like people understand and they're not shying away. We've seen like digital collectibles be like the term used instead of NFTs for some companies who are using NFTs because they want to stay away from NFTs as far as possible. But one thing I noticed with Gunzilla and Off the Grid is that they kind of like they said that they're doing NFTs, but they hedged a bit. So they were like, "Oh, we're doing NFTs, but actually, it's not bad for the planet because we're using Avalanche and not like Bitcoin." And another thing was like, "Oh, like you need to own your items or else like X, Y, Z happens." So they're like really going through this. They're not like shying away from the fact that it's blockchain and NFT, but they're taking like this kind of almost an offensive. Like instead of getting defensive and saying, "Oh, like in a few months they'll answer it," they're very much like, "This is not bad. We're actually doing something good for you guys," and they're not abstracting it away.
I think it also helps that we are long past the NFT mania, where I think gamers were getting all upset about blending crypto with gaming because it seemed like a money grab and something only for the wealthy. Whereas this game, yeah, you earn the rewards to play, but it's still essentially free to play. And it's still free to play in a sense, right? And you can have skins, NFTs, and that that you actually own. You can sell them like in many other games. You have third-party marketplaces as well. But I think it's just that it's free to play. Anybody can do it. So there's lower barrier to entry. I don't need to buy $1,000 crypto kitty or Axie in order to like get my feet wet. And then NFTs are like have come through the hype and gone through the bust and are now, for lack of a better word, boring. Right? No, like hardly anybody cares about NFTs relative to their relative to their peak back in 2021. So I think that kind of helps with easing it in now as just technology. Nothing evil going on here. Don't you dare say that. It's just tech. It's just tech in the background, and we're letting you know this upfront. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point from Mark. I think kind of thinking back on gamers' opinions of crypto and NFTs, I do think that like the initial reaction upon seeing this and hearing this is like the visceral, oh, it's like a cash grab, like it takes them back, to the times before when people were spending $100,000 on a picture on a JPEG, and all the memes of like, well, I can just screenshot your JPEG. That's haha, so funny. I think there's like a lot of that visceral reaction of like, they're using NFTs, like it has to be a cash grab. Like we've seen what developers do with microtransactions and like pay to win games, so like clearly this must be the same thing. I think Mark's points kind of clear the air on that a little bit. Like for any gamer that gives this remotely a chance, like it's free to play. You can hop in, jump in the lobbies, and you have the opportunity to like, the way that the NFTs in the game work is there's like within the live kind of like PvP lobbies, there are these hex, like basically loot boxes that you can pick up and then extract. And when you've extracted them, then you can pay some gun token, or however it works to open them up. And those are your NFTs. So you can completely ignore that system and just play the game and like try to win, or you can play and also take advantage of that. So I do think that like the way that they've designed it is definitely positive in regards to like, if anyone that gives it a shot, like they shouldn't really be concerned with the NFTs because it's not really going to impact their experience if they just completely avoid engaging with them entirely, which is positive. I think on the other hand, though, people are getting very, very excited. They're getting like a little bit off their skis at the moment in terms of like how exciting and impactful this is. The viewership over the past last week, few days, was from sponsored creators playing the game. So you can't go and say, well, it was like one of the top games on Twitch. It's like, yeah, I mean, they were paying for those views, so it makes sense. If you hire the top 50, 100 creators on the platform, you're going to have some of the top views. You're going to get a lot of impressions. So it's way too early to jump the gun to say that that this is like going to solve Web3 gaming and like bring it to the masses. I think if you look at the charts, like it's dropped off quite a bit, the activity just over the past few days. I'll just pull this up and show, but you can see the activity spike on October 11th, 12th, when they were sponsoring all the streamers, and then the quick drop off in views since then. There are still quite a few, creators playing the game, so that is positive. But I think the bigger question, and the one that Ryan alluded to, was, if any mainstream or even decently sized creator does enjoy this game and like picks it up as like a mainstay and can convince some of their audience that it's fun to play as well, then that's where you have a real winner. If it has any staying power, then this idea of like having crypto, NFTs, etc., like power the marketplace for a game, can kind of etch its way into becoming a little bit more commonplace.
We sponsored a Super Bowl ad and got the most views ever. That's crazy. Still though, I like, obviously we should warn people. I still think it was like, at least the team did the right thing. I think if you're getting all that VC money, spend it on actually getting views and getting it a little bit normalized.
Yeah, and I'll caveat that like this is a common approach. AAA games these days, like, I mean, you can go and look at historical trends of like games that see a lot of audience and activity and get clicks for a week or two, and then they die out. This is like very common within the gaming industry. People, they look at the new game, the creators get sponsored, like it's a chance to just get some eyes on it, hopefully get people to download and try it, and if they like it, they'll keep playing. But more often than not, people open the game, they play it for an hour, and they say, you know what, actually I want to go back to playing League of Legends or World of Warcraft. Pick your favorite game that you've been playing for 10 years, whatever. Yeah. It's consistency. People go back to their favorite things when they've tried the new thing.
Especially with battle royales, I think it's very, very difficult to enter that. Top 3 of should be Fortnite, Warzone, and Apex. I think maybe PUBG, but I feel like that, like those 3 are pretty well cemented. That, like you said, you have to pay to at least get a chance. Like to get people to even download your 100 gig game, you have to pay people, because or else, like, I'm not download. It's 5 hours. I'm not doing that. I think before we move on, I want to kind of bring up the one question that I asked, and I'm bringing it up selfishly because I have data on it that I want to talk about. How the hell do you get exposure to something that doesn't have a token, but it's like supposedly not supposedly, I would say it's like the biggest launch of the year for like a gaming, maybe over the last like 3 years. How do you get exposure to it? So I think I'm just gonna keep talking. I think the big thing was, at least like from what I've seen on Twitter and Telegram and Discord, is that Avalanche is supposed to be it. I on this podcast say that it is not it. Depending on how many validators the Gonzilla blockchain has, and what the like congestion is, or let's say like the demand is for L1 validators, Avalanche would be making anywhere from $300 to $2,500 per month from, if they just had 8 validators, which I think makes sense because you want the game to be as performant as possible, which once again brings up the question, how the hell do you make money as a chain that helps other chains launch? Like, at what point do you say, you know what, we can't monetize this very well? Like, what SaaS product would charge only $300 to like enterprise customers, and that's like your whole business? You just charge, like, and it's a very hefty thing. You can have like 300, 400 maximum of these people. Like, realistically, how many L1s are launching under Avalanche? Before I go any deeper into this, I want to say Avalanche did this by design. They had a stake to validate, like they had a stake to validate model before, was very expensive, and then they completely went to the other way, where they were like, we're gonna make it the cheapest place to launch. And it's good, like it's very cheap, but it also just means that you're not making any money off of it. So I want to open that up to the floor and basically say, how the hell do you make money if you're a modular, or you're enabling modular networks?
Yeah, I think you point out something very interesting for a lot of chains that are like in this conundrum of low usage, but relatively high fees for the current state of things. Like, you want to lower fees to kind of spur activity on select chains. However, like for someone to launch a subnet on your thing, like only $300 is inconsequential, right? So do you like you have to lower fees because you're not seeing activity, but then when you finally have something that will, make the jump and come over, you're really not accruing any value. It's a tough spot to be in. And I'd probably bet against it. I think that, the way that you make money is get people to pay fees on your chain, not allowing other people to launch new chains on your thing for very low dollar amounts.
I'm just gonna give 2 to 3 more disclaimers. First of all, like that $300, it could be higher if there's a lot of chains launching on the L1. Like if there's a lot of demand for validators, then that could go up to 2,500 per, like if it's 8 validators, and then it can also like quadruple and double after that, depending on how many validators you want. Second thing is, this hasn't gone into effect yet, but it is the plan to do so. Just so people don't yell at me afterwards and say, oh, that actually hasn't gone into effect yet. Well, you're building towards it, so I think I can judge you based on what you're trying to do.
I mean, I agree with the move. I mean, the usage before. I mean, I was just thinking of any entrepreneur trying to build any kind of application in this space, and then you have to buy a lot of this random token that you've never heard of in order to begin. It's just such a huge barrier to entry. So, I mean, moving towards lowering those barriers and just like make it easier, both like from the developer standpoint and from a monetary standpoint for entrepreneurs to start building things and testing things. I think that's a great move. And you know, most, if not every single successful company now, the biggest giants, were always loss making for the first X 10, 15 years of their existence, right? And then, even things like Amazon just got usage and they got so much usage, they had to build infra, and that infra ends up being their most profitable thing, right? So, like, if you can just somehow stimulate and that kind of user base, maybe your model changes over time, but they like to say when there's this disruptive new consensus mechanism in Avalanche Snowman, or this is disruptive. Like, I think it was like Bezos who said, like, what's disruptive is customer adoption, not the technology, right? And so, and when customers change their behavior and start using products, that's what's the disruptive factor. So I think any kind of change that you make, moving more towards getting those increased customer usage, is, in my books, a good move. Whether this works for Avalanche or not, or any of these other multi-chain thesis, I think it's going to be a volume game. Like, how big is this pie? Not just within the crypto community that we're fighting now, but what does actual adoption look like if it reaches there? I think that's going to be the biggest factor in whether these models work or not.
Yeah, I agree with Mark on this one. I think it's a forward-looking design and approach. Like, I think even if, not that I want to talk about L2s right now, but I think even if you look at sort of the L2 model for Ethereum, it's really the same thing. They're not really accruing anything back to the layer one at the moment. But at some point in the future, like, if you have this future of thousands or tens of thousands of these things, or they have millions of users, then there may be some tipping point where the economics begin to make sense. So I think if you look at maybe like Steam as a comp in the sort of gaming market today, there are over 10,000 games that launch on Steam every year. So not to say that Avalanche is a Steam today, but if Web3 gaming really is a thing in the future, and they're hoping to have thousands or tens of thousands of these subnets for games coming out, there is a point at which the economics could make sense, especially if you combine that with, if they've got these marketplaces and they're, people are interacting with currencies and doing trading volumes and stuff on chain. It's very far down the road. It doesn't make sense right now, but clearly that's the vision. And then I also want to add, I want to have a thesis or a thought on how do you get exposure to guns or off the grid. Just play the game. If you're an investor, like, unfortunately, and you missed out on the private round, like, sorry, you can wait for it to go public. I think if you're just like an enthusiast in the space, like, maybe just play the game and you'll earn some tokens and get some NFTs.
Yeah, that's a good point. Danny, Mark, I think both of you make really good points. And Mark, I completely agree. Like, the previous model was unsustainable. Charging like 500 grand for a 8 validator L1 is unreasonable, and you're also forcing people to buy Avalanche. And you technically just have to stake it, so you'll get it back, but it's way too much of an upfront cost. We'll see on how it works out. I still think if you're charging like maybe $300 for your $15 billion protocol, and this is like your whole thing now, you've stopped focusing on your mainnet to focus on your L1s, and gaming and real world assets are huge, and they'll continue to be huge, and maybe you'll get a lot of L1s going. I still think it's like, at that valuation, I just think it's a bit much, but fair points. Ryan, do you have any valuation / revenue related or extension related takes that you would like to share with us this week?
Yeah, piggybacking off of all your points on value accrual, there's this constant theme of, are L2s and rollups, are they extensions of Ethereum or whatever L1 they live on? And the conversation's still going on. It's been going on for a long time. It was debated at permissionless across a number of panels. I think like I think I know the answer, pretty confident in it. The correct answer is like, who cares? If you're thinking about if you're thinking about what I mean, like, look, if you want to be like philosopher king and think about how things are related and what is important from a spiritual or like social perspective, like, cool, go all out. What matters for a lot of crypto market participants is the value flow and value accrual. And when you look, like, Blockworks research now has this data across, many ETH L2s. You can look at the value that, ETH L2s pay to ETH. You can look at the value that ETH L2s accrue from execution. And you can very safely say, looking at this data, that over the last like 4 months, for every dollar that leaves the ETH L1 and goes and performs execution on an ETH L2, the ETH token retains 1 penny of that value for every dollar that leaves, in terms of settlement and DA fees. So, like, quantitatively, we can say, like, doesn't really matter. Like, we know that those things are very economically different, and the value retained from ETH is very, very small. So, yeah, I think end of the day, like, it just doesn't matter. ETH retains close to zero of the value. And like, if you want, so you say like, oh, okay, so, execution has to 100x to keep up on fees accrued to ETH, right? Like Arbitrum plus Optimism plus base. If you want to keep value capture for ETH token constant, you actually have to 100x execution, and you're still down 93% from bull market peaks in 2021. So quite a tall order. But yeah, now that we have this data for subs, I'm really excited to see what the market does with it. I think it'll change the conversation.
Ryan, do you want to run over some of these graphs that you made me put together this morning?
Yeah, you can just look at it as a time series. So I was actually pretty shocked. I was, I knew that these were small in terms of execution. I did not realize how small, especially settlement, would be, because theoretically, like, you got to do a lot of settlement, but like, I know it's like 32 bytes at a time, so it's like a pretty small number. But like, DA is actually more of a moneymaker than settlement. DA, for every dollar of execution that moves off of the ETH L1, ETH will retain anywhere from 10 basis points to 150 basis points worth of value in DA costs. And the value retained from settlement, posting that state route, rounds to zero. In the week ending September 30th, ETH retained 7 basis points of value in terms of execution from like posting state routes. Like, it's an inconsequential amount. So yeah, it's from a revenue perspective, it's just like really mind-boggling numbers there.
I think to make things kind of even worse, like even if Arbitrum were to 10x its execution, that doesn't scale linearly with data availability costs. You can do things like improve the compression algorithm. You can do things like change the timing at which you post data to the blobs, right? You can switch between blobs and call data, and you can do different things to lower your own costs. So like, what I'm like now thinking, okay, obviously we want more execution. It's still going to do something. It may not scale linearly. What kind of scales a little bit more linearly? Like what is working at ETH's favor for the L2s? And I think it might just have to be number of rollups. I was looking at this right before the pod, and right now there are 90 L2s, I think, about that on Ethereum. 40 of them use Ethereum as for data availability. So that's 40 L2s that we got in the past 3 years, right? And then luckily L2Beat also has something called upcoming L2s. and there are 90 upcoming L2s, and I assume upcoming means in the next year. And I looked at that list, and coincidentally, again, 40 of them are plan to use Ethereum for data availability. I mean, all of them are using it for settlement, but as Ryan said, that's like a rounding error. So I'm just like thinking, okay, so 40 in the first 3 years, 40 in the next year. If you can keep this acceleration coming, and I looked at it on like Sony's L2, Sony wasn't even on the list. So there's like some that I'm sure that maybe haven't put their data onto L2 betas yet. But if L2s can continue to expand at that rate, then maybe next year we can actually get to the blob target of 3 and actually start to see data availability maybe worth something. But then again, there's paired ass coming up after that, and then full dank sharding. So it's going to be a cat and mouse game between the two. But I think it's still going to be dependent on on do we see L2s accelerating and then continuing to do so, or are they going to fall off? I think that's going to be the biggest thing for the thesis.
I think one thing I want to mention about you saying we've had 40 and now we've had 40 as well is this picture, which is like my 3-month-old is now twice as big as when he was born. He's on track to weigh 7.5 trillion pounds by age 10. And it's like at one point where I'm like anecdotally, everybody that I've talked to has just stopped bridging over to L2s. Like it just doesn't, like, to new L2s. What was the last one that you were like, oh, this is worth it? Like, what are you gonna do on these L2s? And at some point, the market realizes that they stop building L2s because nobody else is funding L2s. Like, if you can, or we're going like a really insane way where it's like we're putting like Slack on the L2, like every Slack message is an L2 or something like that. Like that's the level that we have to get to, because the market's not going to fund L2s anymore. Like eventually, maybe this year, maybe next year, we'll do a couple more. Oh, this one's very special though. We're doing a DeFi only L2 this time. Oh, we have like a liquidity hub under this one. This one's like gaming focused. At some point, somebody's going to say, you know what? Like, let's stop. Let's stop doing L2s. Which is, I can see it going more and more throughout the bull. I like, but I feel like this is the L2 cycle. Like, unless ETH hits some form of like ridiculous number where it's like, I think it's supposed to be 10,000 L2s. Like Daniel Smith could pull it up right now, but like that's the number that's supposed to like make sense for ETH. And you can only get that, in my opinion, this bull, like this run, because next run I don't see anybody being like, oh, we have to build more L2s. Like it's not. I don't see it being a very fractionalized market. I don't think there's that many users, unless it's like we do some app chain L2 thesis. Then that's different. And I assume that's what you were thinking as well. Like I think that's the logical step, is if we're gonna do a lot of L2s, we're gonna do app chain L2s. But then we get back to the point: why not own the full stack? And then we also get to the point where it's like, if you are doing an L2, you want to minimize your costs as much as possible. It just makes sense because you don't want to charge your users. So why the hell would you use Ethereum for DA? Like there's stuff that's a lot cheaper. Even Celestia's, I don't know how much more cheap. I think it's 90% cheaper. And then now there's stuff that's 90% cheaper than Celestia. Like Nuffle, Near's DA thing is like 80% cheaper than Celestia or something. And then we're going to get even cheaper stuff. So Mark, I think in the end, I agree with you. Like you said, where it's like storage costs are just going to keep getting lower and lower. Yeah, it's just going to get lower, and then nobody's going to want to use ETH anyway. So, and like you said, settlement's a rounding error.
I do have one thought here, somewhat unrelated to the DA focus and the settlement focus, but I think seeing the kind of the failure of ETH to choose and select and enshrine like a native L2 and capture those fees for itself by pushing the execution there and then recapturing it by kind of owning that sequencer. This has really opened up the opportunity for Optimism to build out a great business model, since settlement and DA is so cheap. The OP Superchain stack at this point, with explicit agreements related to capturing a percentage of revenue or gross profits. Like we have this wonderful dashboard now on Blockworks Research Analytics. And you can see that like across the chains today, sorry, that's transaction fees. If we look at estimated contribution revenues, they're not massive, but, tens of thousands of dollars from the chains in this collective. And if we look at L1 expense by chain, across the board, we're looking at maybe a few $1,000s, maybe $1,000 or $2,000 back to Ethereum. So I think there was, an opportunity for like the ETH community to think a little bit harder about what these economics might look like and how they might accrue back to the L1. And instead, I think it was kind of like, well, settlement and DA is going to be incredible. Don't worry, it's going to scale like crazy. But there really was an opportunity to kind of like enshrine and capture a significant portion of this, but instead decided to just sort of push that off. And I think, this kind of economic model chased after by optimism, I mean, this could actually work at scale if they're able to capture a portion of revenues from all the L2s that build in their stack or in the Superchain.
I completely agree with you. Every week we shit on ETH, and every week I say, yeah, I completely agree with you. And probably for the next few months, this is going to be the case. At some point, we'll hit a bottom, but we'll see.
Yeah. I said this on the Lightspeed pod, but I am looking forward to.
Wait, you went on the Lightspeed pod?
Yeah, we did a joint episode with them during permissionless. I don't know if you were informed.
I was not informed.
Blasphemy.
But yeah, so we did that episode, and yeah, look, I can't wait until we're bullish on ETH again. Like that's going to be a very exciting time. ETH is a moneymaker, objectively. If you look at all the fees that it generated around August 6th when we had those, or August 5th when we had those liquidation events, like Mevin fees went through the roof. It's still, and with the activity leaving in mass, it's still the top fee generating and top 1 or 2 chain by DEX volume. So like, look, it's massively bullish if Max Resnick and friends can steer the ship and get these guys to compete with the L2s. I'm gauging that probability day by day. I'm reaching out to all our ETH natives to see how they feel about it. They hate it now, but that view is getting airtime increasingly, and that's super exciting. So we'll see how it plays out. And once things start to flip, like, this can become an ETH pod.
Yeah, I miss being bullish if you're.
Highly unlikely, but non-zero chance.
Okay, we'll end it at that. Mark, Danny, anything else that you guys want to specifically bring up?
That I am still an ETH bull. It's such an hated asset, and I love to see it.
Yeah.
The whole space will 1000x. Raise your targets.
Yep. If you get liquidated, you can always get a job. So size up, bucko. All right. Thank you for listening. Ryan, Danny, Mark, thanks for coming on. Have a good day.